Hey traders, welcome to the weekly game plan for the FX commodities and crypto markets. Starting with the dollar, we can see that the DXY had a little bit of a dip heading into or following the consumer sentiment, the Michigan consumer sentiment figure that came out on Friday. But I don't think really it's changed much in terms of where we see this dollar moving from here. This is the daily chart. I think what I'm seeing is really one of two things. Really what it is either we can look at this as an A, B, C, D, E, and we start to accelerate from here to the upside, or it's going to be a little bit more complex than that. And what this was the initial impulse, and meaning would have to move all of this correction over here. And this means it would get choppy in this region for some time and play out as a corrective structure, eventually with another dip to the downside. Before continuing to the upside. So either way, it seems both of those scenarios point to upside. So for now, because of this is the most simple version, we're keeping an eye on this, insured above the highs for this dollar DXY, which would allow for an impulse to the upside as we continue to chop around here for some time, basically for, I would say, probably the rest of the month into this region. If we just stay chopping in this region, that means we are in corrective structure, and then later on we will get a pop higher, then a dip, and then we would look for the longs. But either way, I remain a dollar bull. Euro US dollar, kind of same scenario. Although this does look like it's more of an A, B, C, D, E, or perhaps this is an impulse and then just a lower time frame corrective structure, something much smaller that is still going to turn towards the upside or towards the downside. So I still see downside on the euro, slightly underwater in this trade, but I still see good analysis for continuation to the downside moving forward. Same thing with the pound. We spoke about the pound being a potential trade to the downside. It looked like this little last pop was the ABC, but then we had the second pop. And all that really means to me is central structure was a little bit of a running flat, and then the structure is the same thing, running flat. In terms of alternation, I'm not sure we have much alternation there. You might see a little bit of a chop here and then another pop higher before we fall. But I still think an inch order below the low is still valid if you weren't taken into the previous one. If you were taken in, your stop should be above the high, or it's very close to being stopped out here. You may want to consider widening your stop on this one by a couple of point decimals of a percent, because there's potential again, like it's just going to come here. As long as you still got that 1% risk on, which you should have, you could maybe shift that to 1.5 risk by widening your stop slightly. That's probably the best potential outcome for this trade, to play it that way. Otherwise, you may be taking a little bit of a stop or loss. Maybe that way is another way to do it, is to take that 1% loss here and then put another inch order below the lows in case you do take that trade in. Aussie dollar, US dollar, kind of still chopping around. I still see downside here, but it's not the cleanest picture. US dollar CAD's a much cleaner one. I still like the trade. As you can see, there wasn't much in terms of dollar sentiments against the CAD on Friday, which means we can see that dollar bull is really weighing hard on the Canadian dollar, and the inch order above the highs is still definitely valid. So we'll be watching for that. To continue, US dollar yen really hit the US dollar yen hard with this really big impulse to the downside. And what I'm thinking here is, because of all of these impulsive waves, potentially what we're looking at here is just a C wave that has an A, B, C, D, E within it, and you'll see another test of the lows and then an acceleration to the upside from there. So this shouldn't affect us at all. Our stop loss was going to be above, or entry order was going to be above the highs, and we're waiting for corrective structure. And this is a great example of why we wait for corrective structure without just getting in on the next impulse. So this looks like it should go and break the lows once more and then turn to the upside from there. So I'll be watching for that this week, waiting for that entry. US dollar Swiss, lower time frames, there's not much clarity, but why I put it on the list, I just want to show you the monthly time frame. Actually, I want to go to the monthly time frame on the longer term chart, on the IDC chart. And you can see how we have this big impulse, and you have another impulse up to the upside, basically from early 80s. Then there's 1, 2, 3 down. I think this is your B wave down. And now what we're seeing here is the start of this move. So this is why I believe this is part of the dollar bull market. We're sitting at 0.915. You can see how the dollar rally, can see the Swiss go to kind of 2.195. And what we're looking for here is this first corrective structure to take off to the upside. When we go to the weekly chart, you can see how we have a little bit of a structure that's formed already in terms of an impulse up. I went to the line chart here because of that big dip from the US dollar, from the Swiss, I'm pegging from the euro. But I look at it as this being an impulse up. This big dip was your A wave, chopping up B wave. And because your A wave is basically one move, it all happened in one day, you're going to have a long drawn out C wave, which we had here. So now I'm looking for a turn to the upside here on the lower time frames. And you go to the dailies, you can see we had this nice big impulse. But then we've gone into this little section here, which I can only assume for now is something along these lines, something corrective for continuation to the upside. So I'm waiting patiently to find structure within this, because I'm really keen to get in on that long, because it should be a really nice move to the upside as that dollar bull market takes hold. So I'll be watching this US dollar Swiss, waiting for clarity to look for those long trades. Silver, still kind of chopping around in this region. It looks like a little bit of a structure may have formed here, but really nothing we can write home about. Potentially, you could look at this as running flat or contracting flat, something along those lines. But yeah, entry order below these lows I still think is valid, and we should already be in this short from this region here following the end of that structure. So we should be in profit, and that depending how you play it, are you either going to be moved to break even, or you're just letting it run. If you have moved it to break even, maybe you want to add a little 1% position below the lows, just to really add in and scale into this trade without adding risk. I still see downside on the card. I still think the structure is really good. Nothing's really changed there. Gold, a little bit different. Really messy, choppy chart, difficult to read as it stands. We have this 1, 2, 3 up, or it's just a 1 up to here because this is your high. Then you have this kind of choppy move down. I wouldn't really look to call this an ABC, because I don't think that's a kind of B wave that I'm looking for. I don't think it has the complexity that I would like. It's just to draw it in. Can we really see that this is what we're looking for? It's actually starting to look more like an expanding triangle. And that would make more sense than anything else right now. But yeah, again, there's nothing really there for trading. We're just kind of watching that from the sidelines, waiting for clarity. But again, longer term, I still think gold is heading lower. Just looking for clarity. Copper. Let's see, we had this little zigzag corrective structure here. Not often we get zigzags, but you can see how clean and clear it is. Nice, but 1, 2, 3 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1 down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 down. That's your B wave there. And then your C wave to the upside. Quite an extended wave as well, actually. But we started to see good downside now. And that should continue moving forward. It means this corrective structure is complete as a zigzag. And this should just continue to move to the downside from here now. Only concern now, because this is a zigzag, is maybe this whole thing is corrective. I don't think it is, but you have to keep that in mind. But if that is the case, your minimum is around about 410. So you need to look at this trade and try getting to break even, basically, as these lows are broken. 3.8, obviously an area of concern as well. So on the lower time frame, it's potential again that this is your ABC. But at the end of the day, the higher time frames are confirming that we are heading lower in copper, and we should at least go below 2. So again, part of that dollar bull market and resources turnaround. Euro Swiss, we're still waiting for that corrective structure. Obviously, we've had a nice, decent looking A wave here, and we're waiting for this to form into something more corrective to give us that long trade. And just a reminder to zoom out and see how we trade in this big ABC corrective structure. That looks really good. Just waiting for that to play out. Euro Oz. If you guys remember this one, we were looking for this to rally to the upside. It's kind of taken a slow start. If you manage to get into any of these trades, you should be well off now. But it's been really challenging to find a decent entry here. So just keeping an eye on this still. waiting for a corrective structure. What I like about this is if we get a decent corrective structure here over the next few days, probably weeks actually, it means all of this is your big impulse to the upside, your first impulse, and it's very, very choppy, meaning the next one should really accelerate to the upside if we get that. So we'll be keeping an eye on this one as time goes on. Euro yen, just zoomed out on the daily, you can see how we have a very, very beautiful ABC corrective structure here. So we're looking for that turn to the upside in the euro yen. Not much yet. We're just making new lows now. So we're just waiting patiently for something more clear to develop here. It looks like maybe what we saw here was a little bit of a structure. So you might see some pretty decent downside here first before we get our C wave turn to the upside. But structurally speaking, it looks really good to me. And we should see some upside from around about 128, maybe 127, somewhere in this region actually. So yeah, you can see how we're going to accelerate to the downside first, down towards this 127 region, and then we should turn to the upside from there. So in terms of the short trade, if you're looking for a little bit of a day trade or structured day trade, as our traders call it, you can see how structurally speaking, that looks really good. It would be really, really nice if there was just one little pop up from here to give you this little bit of a structure. Then you can start to look for that structured day trade down towards 127. So we're watching for that as a structured day trade to the lows, and then we can trade that to the upside. We'll just have to look at the numbers of this trade once we see that pop higher, if it's worth taking. Euro yen, sorry, euro pound, our long trade has worked out well. Still continue to build, and I think we are going to go see 87 on this now that we've had this little bounce. I don't think all of this in here was a structure. I don't see the B wave being worth a structure. So we should see a nice upside from here, and this should continue to rally pretty nicely, and then we can look for the short once we hit that 87 region. Hopefully get to our full target of the trade up at 87.10, and then we can see that turn to the downside from there. Pound Swiss, as you can see, starting to turn to the downside. As we said, we look at this as an ABC structure, and we're waiting for this with an entry order below the low. So starting to get a nice acceleration to the downside here, which is really interesting. Really nice corrective structure so far. So I think entry order below the lows is still really the only way to play it, unless we get something really clean and clear in here on the lower time frames that indicates further downside. I'm just a little bit concerned that this is potentially a structure here, which would turn to the upside. So I'm just concerned about getting in too early into this trade. So we need to wait for something very clean and clear. Otherwise, entry order below the lows. And it's the same thing with the pound yen. When we see the structure zoomed out, it's a little bit of a mess. I think it's an expanding triangle, something along those lines. As you can see, A, B, C, D, E, something A, B, C, D, E. This was your E wave. Now we're turning to the downside. But as you can see, there's also this impulse and then potential ABC structure there. So I'm concerned about looking for a short trade here. So I'm more inclined to just wait and be patient with it, knowing that the higher time frame is a nice and clean and clear, and we can put an entry order below the lows and just be patient with it, because a higher time frame structure says from there we're going to see at least 120, probably even further lower on the pound. So happy to just be patient with that one. Same with the Swiss yen, but I really like the pound yen more. So I'll be interested in that. Aussie dollar yen, structure is really a mess on the lower time frame. So we're still waiting for clarity there. I still think we've turned. We're just waiting for a decent entry order. You can see even on the 4 hour, it's a little bit of a mess. Maybe this was a little bit of a structure here, and this is your running flat. Didn't really get as high as I'd wanted. Which means it's not really a valid ABC structure, and you might find that this actually gets corrected in this region. So I'm a little bit wary about getting into this short, an entry order below the lows. I'm going to err on the side of caution and rather wait for the pound yen to take that trade. CAD yen is kind of a similar story. I'd rather take the CAD yen and the Aussie yen, the entry order below these lows. But again, structurally speaking, still a little bit of a mess, just waiting for clarity there. New Zealand dollar yen, actually has a decent structure. So New Zealand dollar yen much better than Aussie yen as well. Entry order below the lows is valid. And like we said, we're still waiting for this little corrective structure here. And we can get into this trade a little bit earlier. I still like the trade. There was a little bit of a flag type structure here for a brave trade. But I'm more inclined to wait for something more defined to get into that short. Otherwise, entry order below the lows. Then Swiss yen. We still liked, just to zoom out and remind you what we were looking for. This A wave up, ABC down, A wave up, that's your ABC structure. We were looking for a lower time frame corrective structure to get into the trade. We were looking for this pop higher, which is exactly what we got from this. Beautiful little running flat type structure. A little bit worried about this little pop higher A, B, C, D, E, but it still works, which means entry order below the lows is definitely still valid. So I want to start to shift this entry order up to this level here. Can also start to narrow the stop loss. And yeah, I think that looks like a really good trade to me. Higher time frames are looking really good. The structure on the lower time frames is really good. So yeah, really keen for that entry and just kind of set and forget type trading on this one, just to let it run. US dollars are. I still see upside here. I think this is still a kind of expanding flat. I think structurally that's all done. I think on the lower time frames, if you zoom into it, you'll see this is actually just a lower time frame little flat pattern that's formed here. You'll see another leg lower down towards 1460, and then we should get some upside from there. Only concern about that is that this a little bit short for my liking in terms of this corrective structure. So you might see it get a little bit more complex, but again, it should just start to accelerate to the upside given the higher time frame structures that we're looking at. Oil, quite a big down day today, which is good news because like we said, we were looking for one more leg lower on UK oil. We want to see at least 67.30 broken before we can look for that long trade. Again, maybe this is part of the corrective structure and this is a wave failure. That's another example of potential trade forward. But again, it's just patiently waiting for structure. No trades just yet. I'm not getting into this long just yet because I don't think the structure is complete. I need much more confirmation to look for that long. I still think one more leg lower is on the cards. And I think we're going to get that leg now before we see an impulse to the upside. Bitcoin, a little bit concerning in terms of this rising wedge, like we are going to see a turn here. I still believe this is a expanding flat. Just to zoom out, I still think we're going to see another leg lower here. I think the alts are confirming it better than Bitcoin is, but I still see a leg lower. And then we see this 4 hour, you look at this MACD divergence from the highs. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a rising wedge type structure that's formed here. So we'll be watching again, keep watching those crypto trades, looking to get out of them with any sign of a leg lower from here. So that's another one that's looking pretty weak. And then Ethereum is another one, really nice impulse to the upside, but we started to see this momentum fade with kind of a rising wedge. And you can see how that's all sitting in part of this ABC corrective structure. Yeah, it's just an expanding type structure, which means another leg lower is on the cards. And when we look at Cardano, we're seeing the same thing. It's had a really, really solid run. I mean, this is a fucking phenomenal C wave from 1 all the way up to 2.13. That's 100 and something %. But structurally speaking, you have this ABC structure. If you go to the line chart, you can see why I'm using this as the central B wave and this as the low. I think there's low liquidity on this little pin bar down here, so we're not going to count it. I think this is your end of your B wave. You have an A wave up, bit of an expanding triangle in the middle, B wave there, big strong C wave. And now we should start to see an acceleration to the downside. But this, again, this kind of move is exactly why I'm really excited about Cardano moving forward and looking to get into some long-term investing into Cardano. And we'll discuss that further in the members area. It's cool, guys. Hope you have a good trading week. As you can see, there's a lot of opportunities on the cards. Members will discuss our trading strategy in tomorrow's session, but you should just see what's basically clean and clear from last week's trading strategies. We're keeping that in play. And then obviously the big one is the Swiss yen trade. We're shifting the entry order a little bit higher, but other than that, the strategies remain as we spoke about last week, and we'll chat about them again tomorrow. So have a good day. We'll chat to you then. Ciao.